Some families frame their love in pictures and hang it up on the walls. Mine framed their expectations and hung them around my neck like a weight designed to pull me under if I ever dared to rise above them. And no one pushed harder than my mother, Lorraine, whose disappointment felt like a religion she practiced daily. My father, Victor, was quieter with his judgments, but the silence stung worse because it meant he didn't think I was even worth criticizing. Then there was Dylan, golden boy since birth, groomed for greatness like he stepped out of a brochure advertising the perfect son, while I was the footnote no one read. He could sneeze and be praised for breathing correctly. I could win a medal and be asked why it wasn't gold. When Paige came into the picture, she didn't just marry my brother, she married my parents' approval. She played the part perfectly, flawless makeup, sweeter-than-sugar smile, charm that could hypnotize an entire room into believing she was heaven-sent. I watched how they adored her, how their eyes lit up every time she spoke, and I swear the sun didn't rise for our neighborhood until Paige opened her eyes in the morning. Meanwhile, the only time they remembered I existed was when they needed something, errands, favors, chores, pretending to be grateful for scraps of affection. I thought maybe adulthood would change things, that growing older meant finally being treated like a person instead of a problem they were forced to raise. Instead, the gap widened, Dylan got promoted, Paige announced their engagement, and suddenly their wedding was the only conversation that mattered. I was given a dress that didn't fit and instructions not to embarrass them, as if breathing was offense enough. Paige would tilt her head and say, "You're so lucky to be part of this," like my invitation wasn't a pity gift. And maybe it was. The rehearsal dinner confirmed it. I wasn't just background, I was the punchline. When Paige's maid of honor joked that I should walk down the aisle with a sign saying, "Don't worry, she's not adopted," everyone laughed harder than the joke deserved. Lorraine laughed loudest. Victor didn't look at me at all. Dylan just sat there and let it happen, because in that moment, my humiliation was his entertainment. That was when something inside me hardened, a part of me that had been cracked too long finally clicked into place and formed something sharp. They didn't want me to take up space. They wanted me silent, invisible. Which is exactly why I decided I would be neither. Because if they expected me to stay quiet at this wedding, they were about to choke on every word they ever made me swallow. Wedding day mornings are supposed to feel magical, sunshine, butterflies, excitement humming in the air like music, but for me it felt like waking up inside a performance I never auditioned for, where my only role was to stay quiet and hold the spotlight steady on everyone else. Lorraine barged into my room at sunrise with a list of tasks so long it could have doubled as a scroll announcing royal duties. "Don't mess this up," she warned, which was hilarious considering I wasn't given the chance to do anything worth messing up. They didn't want my help, they wanted a servant they didn't have to pay. Paige looked breathtaking in her silk robe as she floated around the bridal suite like a fairy tale princess, the kind who stabbed people in the back with a glitter-coated blade and made them thank her for it. She caught my eye in the mirror and said, with a fake sweet smile sharpened to cut, "Try not to look miserable today, Ava. It's bad for photos." I wanted to tell her photos couldn't capture misery I'd spent a lifetime perfecting. But I bit my tongue, tasted blood, and swallowed every comeback like usual. The ceremony rehearsal had been humiliating enough, as if the universe wanted to test how much dignity I had left to lose. The seats were arranged so the important family members lined the front, and my place was a chair so far to the side it might as well have been in the parking lot. Paige's friends whispered loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "Why is she even in the wedding?" and "She looks like an unpaid extra," and each comment hit like a slap my parents pretended not to notice. Dylan didn't even glance at me, too wrapped up in Paige's orbit to see the gravity crushing his own sister. But here's what none of them realized: every insult, every ignored plea, every moment I was treated as a disposable accessory, it was all kindling. And the fire they built inside me was almost ready to spread. Later, when Paige, even my thoughts wanted to call her by the wrong name to show how little she mattered, demanded that I take charge of the wedding rings, Lorraine's eyes narrowed like the request was a trap I was too stupid to notice. "Don't lose them," she hissed. "We've trusted you with enough." I smiled then, not the forced, trembling kind, but a real one, sharp and knowing. Because being trusted with something that important meant one thing: they finally gave me leverage. And people like my family should know better than to hand power to the girl they spent her entire life pushing into the shadows. And that tiny mistake they made was the first step toward the downfall none of them saw coming. Every second of that reception felt like a countdown to destruction, and for once, I wasn't the one being destroyed. The ballroom was drenched in flowers and fairy lights, the kind of scene people post online to pretend they're happier than they really are. Paige glided around greeting guests like a queen greeting peasants, and everyone bent over backward to kiss the ground she walked on. Meanwhile, I floated through the crowd completely unseen, which was exactly what I wanted. You'd be amazed what people reveal when they forget you're standing right there. I heard bridesmaids gossiping about how Paige already complained her wedding felt too cheap, despite the price tag being enough to buy a house. I heard Dylan's groomsman joke that once the night ended, he'd never see his friends again because his new wife controlled everything: his job, his social life, his choices, even the colors of his socks. But the worst part wasn't the gossip, it was how loudly my own parents laughed when someone said, "Imagine if Ava ever tried to get married. Who would even show up?" Laughter. From the two people who brought me into this world. My hand shook around the champagne flute I was passing out, not from fear, but from the realization that I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted them to see what they created. They built a girl who survived on scraps of affection and humiliation, and they never once thought she'd stop starving. Near the bar, Paige's voice cut through the noise like a blade dipped in honey. "Dylan is such a puppy," she giggled to her friend. "I can make him do anything. Watch." She sent him to fetch her lipstick from the bridal suite, like he was an errand boy, not her husband. Her friend asked if she felt guilty. Paige's answer? "Please. I could cheat on him right now and he'd still worship me." My heartbeat went still, because I knew she wasn't exaggerating. A few months back, I'd accidentally seen messages pop up on Dylan's old iPad when Paige borrowed it. Flirtatious texts. Late-night calls. A contact name saved under an emoji. At the time, I wanted to believe the best. I even considered telling Dylan. But no. I realized now was not the time for warnings. Now was the time for fireworks. I slipped away when no one noticed, heading straight for the AV booth overlooking the entire room. My phone trembled in my palm, but not from doubt. I scrolled to the screenshot album labeled Truth. The moment I pressed one button, every lie this family ever celebrated was going up in flames. Truth is a funny thing, everyone claims they want it until it finally arrives and tears the pretty picture off the wall, and as I stood in that AV booth with my thumb hovering over the play icon, I realized the truth wasn't just going to ruin a wedding, it was going to expose years of favoritism, hypocrisy, and cruelty my family had wrapped in fancy wrapping paper and called love. I took one final look at the ballroom below, Paige laughing with her perfect lipstick smile, Dylan dutifully at her side like a guard dog who didn't know the hand he was protecting was the same one that stabbed him, and Lorraine and Victor glowing with pride over their precious new daughter-in-law, and then I pressed the button. The slideshow that was supposed to display pictures of Paige and Dylan's love story flickered, glitched, then switched to a screenshot of Paige's messages. "He's too easy." I could get away with anything. The gasp that erupted from the crowd sounded like the oxygen got punched out of the room. Paige froze mid-laugh, her smile dying on her lips as the next screenshot appeared. "I can't wait to see my Vegas guy again, much more fun than Dylan." Dylan's face went blank, shock erasing every trace of joy. Lorraine and Victor both turned toward me in unison, horror dawning slow as the truth kept pouring from the screen like a dam breaking under years of pressure. Paige bolted toward the booth, screaming for the tech to cut the feed, but the damage was already cascading across the giant screen, each message bigger than the last. "Marrying him is my jackpot. He'll do whatever I want." Guests stared with hands over mouths, whispers turning into wildfire. I stepped out of the booth before she could reach me, and I walked down the stairs calm, steady, like the villain in a story who finally gets her monologue. Paige lunged at me, nails out, but security grabbed her instantly. The sight of her kicking and screaming while her perfect wedding makeup streaked into chaos was artistic justice. Dylan stared at the screen, then at her, then at me. For the first time in my life, he saw me, not as background, not as a chore, but as the only person who actually cared about the truth. Lorraine stormed toward me, fury shaking in every step, and hissed, "How could you do this?" I smiled, a real smile, sharp enough to cut. "You raised me to follow the rules," I said. "You just never taught me to stay quiet while everyone else breaks them." Victor tried to speak, but I wasn't done. "This is on you. You taught me that the only way to matter in this family is to make an impact." Congratulations, I finally did. But they had no idea the biggest truth bomb was still waiting to explode. Chaos spread across the ballroom like electricity, guests scrambling between shock and spectacle as Paige was escorted away kicking and screeching that she'd been set up. But that wasn't the end, it was only the first crack, and I had one more truth to deliver, the kind that shatters a family's foundation so they can never pretend it was strong to begin with. Dylan walked toward me slowly, like each step peeled back another layer of denial, and by the time he reached me his voice was a broken whisper, "How long have you known?" I didn't flinch. "Long enough to know you deserved better," I said, meeting his eyes without apology. The room fell silent as Lorraine and Victor closed in, finally giving me their full attention. Ironic how I had to burn everything down to make them look at me. Lorraine's face was twisted with fury, cheeks blotched red under her perfect makeup. "You've humiliated this family," she spat, and the words hit me like déjà vu, the same accusation she'd thrown at me my whole life for simply existing. I stared right back. "No," I corrected. "I revealed the humiliation you tried to hide." Victor pointed a trembling finger at me like I was the villain of his carefully crafted narrative. "You'll regret this," he warned, voice shaking with a control he could no longer find. I stepped closer, letting every wound they gave me sharpen into armor. "I already regret trusting any of you to protect me," I said. "I regret trying to earn love that came with conditions. And I regret staying quiet for so damn long. The truth didn't just live in screenshots and cheating, it lived in every moment they made me feel like a burden, every achievement they dismissed, every time they tried to clip wings they were too afraid to see soar. So I gave them the final sentence, I'm done being the disappointment in your story. I'm writing my own now." Dylan's voice broke behind me. "Ava, thank you." And in that moment, I realized the boy I lost to their favoritism was still somewhere inside him. Maybe now he had a chance to come back. I grabbed my small clutch, walked past the shattered image of a perfect wedding, past the guests who would whisper my name into eternity, past the parents who looked at me like they were finally seeing what they'd created, a hurricane they could no longer control. The night air hit me like freedom, cool and vast and waiting. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed, a job interview request from a media company that had seen my creative work online. A new path. A new life. My life. I smiled, a dangerous, victorious, unapologetic smile. Because the girl they tried to silence didn't just find her voice, she turned it into a weapon, and now the world gets to hear her.